happy for the day. Not going to be doing much too complicated today, because if it's too complicated, I can't do it. But we're going to turn a vase on 4 axes, its own central axis, and then 3 others, and we'll cut these slots in the side while it's doing strange things before our very eyes. Now, the picture that Steve sent round had a vase that was bowing out in the middle. I'm not going to do that one because my wife calls that one my grenade because she hates it. She calls this one That's Better. So have a go at that. But just to continue with Martin's theme of things that make your lathe a little bit more usable, he's done a couple of shelves, and so had I. I have a Coronet Herald lathe, and it has 2 4mm threaded slots on this end underneath, just underneath where the motor is, and that I was hoping to use the Coronet Herald today, but it's not here, so this just fastens on at the end there. And what happens when you do that is that everything you put on it shakes off when you're running the lathe, all except for chippings. It saves chippings very nicely. It's a work in progress, so there's a hole there to put a chuck key, and I have 2 chuck keys, so that chuck key goes in there. I have a thread protector that unfortunately won't fit this lathe, but that just sits on there, and then a dust cover that just sits in that bit there. So it just holds a few things. There's another couple of things that sit on there. It just does help keep everything happy. And then Martin had made a shelf that went on the end of his lathe here somehow, and made me think I had one that I made from a previous lathe that has some threaded knobs, wooden ones, and a wooden thread underneath, and you have to fiddle about underneath to tighten it on. But this one just slots in like that, and it goes in and out very easily and gives a little platform to work on. So I'm actually going to start with this and blank. So it's just your normal blank. This is ash, and I've partly marked it up, and I'm going to show you how to mark the rest up. So that end's marked up. This end has to be marked up to match it, but it's exactly the same process apart from checking that you've got everything the right way around. So, which camera can we do that one, do you think? Yeah, there we go. So I don't know whether you can see that, but I've marked it up from that end. So I've left the space there because we're going to need to put a tenon on to mount onto a chuck. Then I've left a 20mm gap, and then marks for the slots, and a 5mm gap at this end to make any adjustments after I've messed it all up. So the first thing we're going to do is, well, the first thing I have done is mark this end, and I've taken this line all the way to here and put a black mark there and a black mark there to use that as a reference corner that I can get everything else marked from. So turn it round and need this protractor thingy, and so just going to put a line across the diagonal, and I'm going to go just past the middle all the way into the diagonal to indicate that that's the reference corner, and then mark from the other directions like that, and then the centre pop. So now we need to mark out 3 axes at 120 degrees. So I have this protractor thingy here, which I'm setting to 60 degrees. So if I can remember how to use it. There we go. So you see, line that up, make another mark out there, and then line it up this way, and another mark out there. So if you haven't got a protractor, I think what you could do is measure the total track around the edge of the block and divide that by 3, and then measure it along until you get to a third of the way around that way, and then measure around that way to get a third of around that way. I'm sure that would work quite well. So I colour code it so that I can see very clearly what I'm doing. It doesn't stop me making mistakes. I'll show you one in a minute. But range is code along this bit here. And I've got blue on this bit here. That should do it really. I've done green, I'll do a green one as well. And then the offset is just going to be 1 centimetre. So I'm going to go along each of those lines that I've just drawn and pop a hole 1 centimetre along the line. Yeah. So we'll mount this between centres now, the correct way around. So what I've got in here is a crown drive that came from Penn State Industries, PSI in America. Cost me about 18 quid and 18 quid to import it, but I was buying all the things at the same time. And so that's very much cheaper than the step centre, which was the alternative at the time. And I noticed that Record Power have just released a whole load of these things that seem quite good. And RDG Engineering also do. That's a group of people that were mentioned.
RDG, yeah.
This life centre is an RDG one that I bought at the woodworking show in Howell a few years ago, before they ran out of them. So I've just mounted that into the central hole. And you can see it's not very well balanced, but it won't matter. So we're just going to turn that into round before we do anything else. And for that, we're going to use little roofing pouch, which is one of Simon Hope's with a Simon Hope handle, but it's the collared handle rather than the one with the Allen screws in it that you need an Allen key for. So, we'll go for about 500 RPM to start with. Nope. Okay, that's round enough. So the next thing I'm going to do is remark where the center is on here, because I'm going to take a shortcut to getting the shape. So we've got the 10 millimeters for that, 20 for that, 15 for each of these. So that's our middle one. I'm going to use partial chisel down to the size that I want to go to, which is about 52 millimeters to start with. I want it to end up about 2 inches across, 5 centimeters across. But we're going to take a little shave off after we've done the off-centered bits and pieces. So rather than make this wider, I'm just wiggling the chisel so that it makes its own path a little bit wider and it doesn't catch. And then use a slightly swept background little gouge to turn this to shape.
Sorry, you just appeared on Zoom for a second then.
So we've got that to a point where we need to mark it up ready for. Oh no, that's fine. Okay, so repeat the marking again, but with a pencil instead of the center copper. Okay, and then we need to match our colour code. I do, because if I don't, I get confused. So we'll start with, it doesn't matter what order you put them on, what matters is when you do the offset. So start with orange. And we'll mark, miss two, mark the third one along. Miss two, mark the third one along. Ha. Pick another colour. I don't have to do these in this strict order. There's one source of variation is not only the shape that you make it, but you could also mix and match the order that you cut slots. So your colour code doesn't necessarily have to go on in this order. So there we are. So start with our first colour. So I'm going to drop down to the hole that I popped in the orange bit, on the orange line.
If your ends out squared up, will that affect it?
Probably won't hold quite so well on the hand drive. So we need to make sure we're not going to count the tool rest with the blank as it goes around eccentrically. And then to cut the grooves that are on this vase, I used the wedge tool. It's the three-cornered thing with a spike. But you can change the shape of these. You could use a cove tool. You could just use a thin spindle cap, anything, just to make a groove in here as it goes round. So we want to go fairly quickly. I'm setting this to about 1100 to 1200 RPM, something like that. And then the hard bit, we're going to pick up the line and go very gently. If you go too hard, you get lots of pick out. So we line up with the orange line. Go in the depth of the point. And try to so we should have something like what we want. It's not quite wide enough, I think, a little bit wider. And then the next orange one. So all close enough to the same size, I think. So we'll change the axis now.
Sorry, Peter, how do you know how deep you're going?
I'm using the pointy bit on here as a guide.
So you're just going to the same
I
spot
do.
at the top again?
Yes, so where it meets the main barrel or main, whatever we call this bit, on one of these, but it's about 8 millimeters, I think. The idea is to try and get the walls down to 4 or 5 millimeters thick, and then there's a gap that opens up because we've gone a bit deeper than that. Yeah, it's 8 millimeters. So go to V. And it's just a repeat of the same thing. We shouldn't have to move the tool rest, although we do. Because when I turned it to round, it wasn't actually in the middle. So that might affect things later. I did one of these with a 3/8 pointy tool, which is about twice as fast as this, and it didn't work very well. It chewed the edges out quite a lot. So choosing a narrow one seems to be the best thing, unless you're going to develop a new way of dealing with it. I suppose you could go in a few times and then run the V. But we've done that. Last run coming up. Now, one reason why I use the color coding, demonstrate that where I failed to offset it, so I just cut and prove all the way around. So that's there were some interesting words spoken. But I also marked this up with felt pen rather than crayon, and I found that when you mark up with felt pen, it can stain the wood, and it's hard to get it off afterwards. So I switched to crayon. So, the blue picture. there are a couple of little bumps and bangs there. So yeah, there's a little bit, which one are we on? There's a little bit of a cutout there and there. And some pick out in here as well as a spalted area there picked out. So that could be neatened up. But this blank, as we've discovered, is not actually round. So I'm going to swap to this one. Here's one I did earlier. So this one's definitely round, different colour scheme. So we'll swap it and we'll carry on with a different blank because I think this might cause a problem later on. Or a different trimmed one. So we're back onto the centre. What we're going to do is take a skim off here and then make a tenon on the end here to mount into a chuck. So hopefully what that's done is just clean up little bits of pick out on the edges of the slots. Yeah, except that one, of course. So I want to cut the tenon. Parting chisel. Start with. So an old chisel that my brother-in-law gave me when his father died. He had a shed to clear out. He couldn't even open the door to get in. It was so full of things, and he gave me a box of old Marley chisels. So I cleaned this handle up a little bit, and then I don't think I was ever going to use a parting chisel that was quite this wide. That's sort of the widest that I would use. So I've angled this end to be the same angle as a dovetail. So I can now just shape this. By holding the chisel perpendicular to the blade bed. You can now mount that because we need to hollow. You can mount that on the chuck now. And that can go at the same time. Just to get this centered again, I'll use the tailstock. And then I'm going to cheat for the holing using drill bits. First one is just a standard 13mm drill bit just to get started. It goes in quite easily. And just progressively widen the hole out and then finish off with a hole. So need about 500 RPM for drilling at this size. Now, on my lathe, what I can do is just release the tailstock, push. I'm just going to widen that out progressively. I'm pretty sure that this drill bit isn't going to go right through the bottom of the bars, but we'll just make sure where they're going to. Yeah, be right up to here, which will not do. So I think you get the idea with that. I'm just going to go bigger and bigger with the drill bits, and probably squeakier and squeakier as we go along. And then start with a chisel. And I've got another blank that I can replace this with where I've done all my drilling and some of the hollowing as well. So that's this one.
You've been watching too much Blue Peter.
Maybe not enough, we'll see. So we've got to get this lined up again now. This is a live centre kit that Paul Howell Woodturning sells, and it's just a bearing on a Morse taper 2 or whatever taper you want, and you turn your own ends. So with a bit of luck, that could just go in there. And touch the sides at some point so that we know we're centred up. We might have to go back to wood. So I'll take this off, otherwise I'm clogging myself on it, make sure. So what I've done to this is finished drilling down to the bottom, and you can see I've also started taking some material out at this end, and it's wise to work from this end while it's supported with as much wood as possible in here, because the other bit of Blue Peter is that. So that was held in there. The other thing I did with this, instead of making the slots 15 millimeters apart, I made them 12, and that made these bits very weak, and I could see them cracking, so I tried to reinforce them with some super glue, and that didn't work, and eventually it just went, and away we go. So, and that was, you can see, I haven't hollowed this end first. I've hollowed the base out first. What I'm going to try and do now is finish hollowing this out at the bottom. I've hollowed to about there, about here, and these slots have opened up, as you can see, but these down here aren't quite as open, so they will open up as we take more material out from inside. And to do that, I'm going to use another Simon Hope thingy, which is just a 6 millimeter, tungsten carbide disc, and need this in the way, actually. So this can reach down right to the bottom and beyond, and they need to be running quite quickly, around about 1000 RPM again. Oh, that's not straight, is it? Not worry. think it's actually distorting it. The shape you do can't be too complicated, because if you can't get to the bottom to hollow these bits out, then you're not going to get these slots to open it. So we've been having a debate, a couple of us, about how we should use these. How many of you got these? Anything like it? Because one piece of wisdom says that you use it at 45 degrees. So you're in there with the angle of the tool that way. But I think it actually works better flat and slightly below the center.
We might have a square bar on.
No, to hold it, you mean?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, but it wasn't meaning that there's a canted over.
Yeah, but would it be a square bar, it puts it at the right angle?
So it's the angle for
I
you.
see. So
Yeah.
yours isn't actually this one, no. Is it what?
It's a sound mill one.
But it's square.
Square
This
bar.
doesn't have anything like that on it at all. This is just round. So that you find your own angle. But
Yeah.
I think it works better just below center. And if you can, get the side of the little blade rubbing as well, and then just change the angle. But it's cut. So not there. So we're starting to get this one hollowing out now and opening up. It's the bottom one. Oh, that started as well. Actually, there's a little hole there. It shouldn't be long now. Or something dramatic happened. Funny how you can flip it. Right.
You talked yourself into that.
Sorry?
You talked yourself into that one.
So we're going to put the other one back on now, I think.
It's nice to know these things happen to other people as well.
Yeah, they happen all the time. I should have learned from the first one, shouldn't I? So. Chances are going to happen again. tray that pull back for speaking again. Unless anybody knows a cure for speaking.
Like wax.
Yeah.
I can take it.
Your jaws aren't up against the end of the bit of wood, are we?
They're not. Yeah, I'll have a look at that.
I just wondered if the tenon was a bit long.
It was on before, wasn't it?
Yeah. If you're trying to hollow with that, I'll probably just
Yeah.
let go.
Okay. Yes, that's because this was not sentenced. So I'll leave that on for the sake of it centered. Got some ripples along here. Try the wax here now.
I'll stop going back.
So we need to drill deeper than that. Have an extension bar. Okay, I think it's tea ready. Okay, we'll take a tea break there. And
It turned out to be medical. Well, Susan was the one that
Okay, welcome back. I hope you're refreshed and invigorated or not. So I've nearly got back to where the disaster happened. I've drilled the hole to the bottom in the biggest size drill bit that I'm going to use, which is that one, whatever size that's 38 mil. Now we've got to try and hollow and get these slots to open up all the way along. So starting at the weakest end, doing it wrong. We've noticed that the chuck isn't running concentrically here. It's got quite a wobble on it. It doesn't seem to have a wobble on my way, so we wonder if this spindle's got a problem. I don't think that's what the problem is with the exploding woodwork. Anymore. Sorry?
Will there be any point in doing the hollowing, making the wall shape and everything, and then cutting the slots slabs? No, you couldn't cut the slot slabs, could you?
You could. I've thought about this, and you'd have to make a jam chuck.
That's right. Yeah.
And then mark that up to match this end.
Yeah.
So possible, but I think that might be nearly as
Overcomplicated.
well. You'd also have quite a weak blank there
I
to
was going
start
to say
putting your
you'd have
slots
a
into.
job.
So whether that would just no idea. It does work. Well, because there's one.
He only did 26 to get that.
Otherwise, you could burn them.
You could use a concentric chuck, couldn't
You mean an eccentric?
you? Yeah, whatever it is, yeah. Eccentric.
Well, you're commenting on the behaviour of this one.
We're all eccentrics.
Yes.
You could start a whole new fashion of slot work.
In very small pieces with raggy edges. Like these. That sort of thing. Eclectic art.
See what you repurpose that for.
Sorry?
See what you repurpose that bit for. Take one and probably put it on display.
I was saying, if you started to attempt this and you weren't that confident with your hollowing, as I am, you could, if it wasn't flared out at the bottom, you could get those bottom slots by doing it.
If you left it parallel side.
Yeah, side and then floated at the top.
Yeah.
Think of that last my little cheat.
Oh, it should be. I've had it for quite a long time. Well, maybe, but I bought it to do this, but I bought it maybe 3 months ago. And then it just sat being ignored for a while. No, see.
putting the two rocks like that, would just show the icons.
Yes, I'm seeing how close it gets and then trying to, because I don't have a much of casting with nothing. No, but, right. I'm not going to bother with the whole thing, because it's just not going to work. But what I'll do, once I've hollowed it to smooth out the inside, I have a series of tools that I've made up just from bits of turned wood with a hole drilled in the end and a piece of, it's actually a tube that's in there. And you can either use that with a power tool and clamp it in there and spin it in the opposite direction to which you're spinning that. But I've also found if you just wrap your sandpaper around and then use them just like this and move them in and out while you're spinning that, of course, and just keep the pressure on the inside. And that's quite a gentle way of doing it, and works quite well. And there's a Velcro on the end there to take a disc, which I've got from off, and that allows you to go down right to the bottom and sand the bottom of the piece. Because if you've drilled it like I've done, using the Forster bit, there's a spike on the end of the Forster bit that always leaves a hole in the bottom. And so everybody, first thing Woodturners do, if I ever turn things over to see how you help them, or to look down the middle to see how you finish the inside. So you have to take that out, don't you? Otherwise people know. I've considered grinding the spike off and just turning it into like a milling tool.
You've got to have two.
Because you might need one as a drill bit.
Do one with a spike and just the last little bit. Take the spike off.
Well, I would have two that size. And what you find with this is, as you're sanding it away, all the sand, dust and stuff comes out through the slots, and you don't really have to clear it out. And it clears itself out. So I won't demonstrate that because that's fairly boring. The outside I will sand either with tool or again with I'll give it a brief sand to this one. Make sure that the dust so I'd go down. I don't go beyond 320 grit now. I used to go down to 400 and sometimes 600. And Dave Lowe, who was a professional down at the bottom here, he used to laugh at people going to 600. He thought that was a ridiculous thing to do, but he did seem to get a good finish. But I use sanding sealer and Yorkshire grit. So you're sanding sort of damp and you don't get the dust. And you don't need to go down to the finer grits because the Yorkshire grit does that. But what you need to do is sand out these slots, and you can use just sanding discs if that's all you've got, or fold a piece of paper over and leave it in a V, and then you rub it in like this. And the other thing I forgot to mention while I was cutting these, if you do get a lot of pick out at the sides, it's a good idea to stop and look for that before you finish cutting the hole. If you just put some thin cyanoacrylate glue on and let that go off or use the activator, that just toughens up and stops the pick out. So it's a case of going around and just cleaning out all the holes, which if you cut them down like this one is so that you've got the gap, there's an edge to deal with as well, which is best dealt with from the inside. But if you've got a long strip of sandpaper, you can feed it down the hole, catch it on the inside and just do this. This is off a thing called a power file, which has a belt. And what they do better than anything is just tear these belts apart before you even start sanding. So there's lots of those hanging around, but you can use those belts, feed them in, get them to go the right way into your fingers.
Do I have to be quiet?
No, love. I don't think I got that.
Like that. Oops, other way. You can get your fingers in, which you can't at the moment. So just tidy all this lot up as best you can.
I'm going to bed.
Yeah, love.
And then
I'm enjoying it because it's not that exciting.
There's nothing on tell.
I would use either a brush with sanding sealer on,
All right. See you in a bit when you come up.
or spray.
I know.
Seems quite wasteful. You seem to use a lot of this, and it's not very
All right, love.
but it does give a very good finish. But I mask off the chuck and I have one of these self-healing mats that have seen better days, and these put back on the bed so you don't get sanding sealer all over the equipment. And then as I say, using Yorkshire grit and follow that up usually with microcrystalline wax, and that seems to do quite nicely. So the other thing, I spray the sanding sealer inside as well. I don't sand again after I've done that. I just leave it, apart from the bit where you can feel it. So if somebody puts it outside, they can feel how rough it is. So I finish the bit that you can reach to, but not the rest of it. And then part off. This again. And then wind, tighten it in so we know where we are, and then wind back a couple of turns, slapping this off, and pull it forward onto there. So there's a gap down the back. I use very thin parting chisel. Cut inwards to make a bowed base. When it's close to the end, I have one of these Japanese style saws that I got from Lidl. Two sets. There's this fine toothed one in one set, and then a much bigger one with coarser threads on that I don't use very much. But this one does quite well. So we're left with a rough base and a nub. I've seen a lot of people use a skew chisel or something like that to just cut that away, but I've never been able to do that. So what I do is have to change this chuck because it won't hold. So I just put into this chuck my sanding arbor. Generally start with a 120 grit disc. Get some clutter out of the way. And just spin it about 1000 RPM and just sand it off. Just keep turning this all the time. Makes a bit of dust, so I have an extractor on. It doesn't take very long. With a transform, just so it's not quite so sharp, and then work your way down the grits, and you soon get rid of that. There's still a bit of evidence of it there, but as you go down through the grits, it will go away. And then that will be it. And that's the finished item that I'll pass around. I'll pass that to you. So that's what we were aiming for all along. There are a number of variations that you can do. You can cut different shape slots, so you could just use a parting chisel and cut squarish slots, anything you like, but I would advise not trying to make them too wide because that does seem to cause a lot of pick out. This one, I very carefully marked this up with 6 axes and then forgot to change them. So I've ended up with just pairs of slots opposite each other. And that, with a little candle in it in the dark, looks quite nice. And this one, same idea with the little electronic candle thingy in it. But again, this was the 6 axes, but I paired them up. So went one way for one set of slots and the other way for the other set of slots, and they just paired either side. And they would work with a vase, but whether you'd be able to hold it successfully, I don't know. But they seem to work for pastels around as well. And with apologies for the disaster, that's it.
We're both in there, I'm sure.
Not with the crowd.
Not with the crowd. I use the same method of cleaning up the bottom, but I just stick the drill chuck in the headstone.
Ah, right, so you use the Morse taper instead.
I've also seen with the sanding arbor, what a lot of people have done, from a bit of scrap that's left in the chuck, put a groove in and with the hole just about the size of the arbor, and you tighten up when you tighten the chuck up, it holds the arbor and sand
right.
nicely. Use a bit of scrap like that.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah.
Not mine, but
to go to the pub now.
Ladies and gentlemen, I think the one thing I would say, anybody who hasn't tried multi-centre turning, do try it. It is, I promise you, not as daunting sometimes as it looks. It's like opening Pandora's box. You know, there's so many different variations you can make. And yes, you'll make ornamental firewood, as we've had a demonstration this evening. I have a wood burner for it. I do say try something different.
The first one I showed that was broken, I took out of the firewood box in the shed to show it.
Anyway, I would ask you to please reply about the hands-on mic when you get an email, just so that we can judge how many layers we need, how many instructors we need. You know, it doesn't just happen, we need to know. So please do reply. People who come in tonight, we'll be happy to see you as well. And Peter, once again, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Could I just ask for